Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the DoD FY18 budget briefing. My name is Stephanie Maloney. I'm a DoD consultant here at IMIX. I've been here for about 4 years. I cover DoD territories like the Air Force and the Army. So welcome to anyone who's joining us for the first time. If you have been here in years past, you're going to notice we have a new face on stage today. That's Mark Weisinger. And Mark's been with us for about the last 3 years as a senior analyst. He covers OSD agencies, the COCOMs, and the intelligence community. And he's also the team's federal IoT technologies expert. So this morning, Mark and I are going to cover what's driving technology procurement across DoD for FY18. So it's been a pretty interesting year. A lot has happened in the last year, especially where budgets are concerned, which makes it tough to stay on top of how legislation and funding are going to translate into actual IT projects. So with the new administration in place, we expected DoD budgets to increase, which they did. So for the next year, the services are really going to be focused on readiness and restoring warfighting capabilities. There's been a lot of concern about adversaries catching up with us while we face budget shortfalls. So you might notice now how not a lot of leaders will use the term near-peer adversaries. They'll just say potential adversaries. So the concern is very real and very urgent. So while DoD works to restore readiness shortfalls, they'll be looking to tech as a way to maintain the military's edge. DoD can use IT to make smarter, faster, and more informed decisions, and push beyond just readiness and get to a place where we're now technologically superior to an adversary. And that will involve sharing and using data across multiple domains. So from our agenda, you can see we're going to take a look at budgets, trends, and drivers DoD cares the most about right now. Then we'll get into our DoD deep dive with all the service branches and then DISA and military health systems. Just like every other year, we're going to be throwing out a lot of names of decision makers. You don't need to worry about writing any of them down. What's going to happen is by Monday, you'll receive an email that'll be an event survey for today. If you fill that out, then shortly thereafter, you'll get emailed a link which will give you access to our territory planner, and that covers all the names of the decision makers today, as well as a lot more information that we won't have time to get to this morning. So jumping right in with budgets. So right now, remember, we're in a continuing resolution, meaning we're funded at the previous year's level, no new program starts, and that takes us to December 8th. So a lot needs to happen between now and then in order to get a budget to pass. So right now, we're going to be optimistic, and we think that there could be more than a 50% chance we'll have an omnibus by then. Congress has passed a budget, but we don't have any appropriations yet. A lot of negotiations and concessions are going to have to be made before a deal could be reached, including raising the budget control spending caps, and both defense and non-defense spending are going to have to increase in order to reach a deal. So it's possible the numbers in the appropriations may not be as high as the president's budget request, which is going to be the numbers we're looking at today. So there is still a little bit of time between now and December 8th, so let's keep our fingers crossed. Then looking specifically at their IT budget requests, the big item to note is that overall the DoD IT request is up about 5% from last year, so everyone gets an increase. The Navy and DoD-wide see the largest increases within the IT request, with a lot of that DoD-wide money going toward DTRA and MDA for modernization of missile defense capabilities, and to DISA for MilCloud 2.0, the Joint Regional Security Stacks, and to accommodate the stand-up of the Joint Service Provider Office, that new Pentagon IT agency. From the Navy, Engine and Canes are going to receive funding from the increase in their request. So, like I said, there's been a lot of concern among top-level DoD leadership about making sure we're using innovative technology for military overmatch capabilities. So they're going to want to make the most of these budgets and invest in technologies that gives us the edge in battlefield situations, whether that's sharing data and integration for multi-domain operations, performing analysis of equipment for predictive maintenance, or investing in autonomous systems. And there are also a lot of changes up at DoD headquarters level that you're going to want to be aware of. And remember, all these changes are being made in order to ensure we outpace any adversary.
So let's jump into some of the latest changes called for in the latest National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA, which is the major policy legislation for DoD and naturally has a big impact on the acquisition and organizational side. Now, these changes are, of course, aimed at maintaining that decisive technological edge going forward into the future. There's concern right now that there's too much attention being paid toward just fielding current capabilities and not enough towards developing future capabilities in terms of both attention and on the funding side. Consequently, the last year's NDAA, the FY17 one, split the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition Technology and Logistics position into two separate roles. The Undersecretary of Acquisition and Sustainment was concerned about maintaining that current capability and will oversee DITRA and DLA. The Undersecretary of Research and Engineering is all about fielding and developing new technologies and will oversee DIUX, DARPA, and the Missile Defense Agency. Now, the big impact from this reorganization is making sure that the Missile Defense Agency is realigned to focus on developing new missile defense systems rather than just fielding existing ones. And this change will take place this February. Now, in a similar vein, the FY18 NDA proposes a split of the role of the DoD CIO role into two separate positions. The Chief Information Warfare Officer position will be dedicated to cyber defensive and offensive operations and capabilities. And the Chief Information Warfare Officer will have a significant role in directing cybersecurity policy and posture all across the department, particularly at NSA and Cybercom. Now, any cybersecurity vendors here, including anyone with any offensive tools, will pay close attention to the development of this position this year. The Chief Management Officer, in contrast, is focused on business systems and non-cyber IT, except in the case of nuclear, space, or C2 systems. The Chief Management Officer will have the authority to direct the service branches as well as the various DoD agencies in regards to their business systems as well as their headquarters IT. Now, the House's version of the NDA originally featured the creation of the Space Corps because they felt that the Air Force wasn't as focused as they should be on the space domain. Now, this has been eliminated in the latest version of the NDA, but there should still nonetheless be a lot more resources dedicated towards space going forward. And these are going to see a lot of the same needs as traditional weapon systems programs. We're talking about infrastructure configuration, better information sharing, increased cyber protection resiliency, as well as figuring out how autonomy can help make these systems more efficient. Now, speaking of cyber protection, the NDA for this year will focus on making the DoD CIO role also responsible for ensuring a secure supply chain, particularly for IT. Now, department-wide, and particularly at DLA, there is a lot of focus on a secure supply chain. So we expect this to be a key differentiator for IT hardware and software going forward into this fiscal year. Now, the final item I'll call out here is Section 801 of the House-passed version of the NDA. Includes a provision to require the GSA to administer and DoD to implement online marketplace for the commercial off-the-shelf technology or off-the-shelf products, but they just recently eliminated IT as part of their initial deployment for that. So going forward into this year, we're not necessarily going to see IT as part of that Amazon marketplace, but you want to pay close attention to it going forward as it may be slipped into a pilot deployment for this year or next.
All right, moving on to look at some trends and drivers across the department, and all of these are the capabilities DoD is looking at to make sure we have the right mix of capabilities for the future. So no matter what corner of the DoD you talk to, you'll hear all about big data challenges. Data is very valuable to DoD leadership and will play a big role in the development of the third offset. They want to learn how to weaponize their data. In the past, the department was concerned about having access to enough data, but today the proliferation of sensors across the defense enterprise has resulted in massive data overload. So the challenge is no longer about collecting the right data, it's about quickly identifying decision-altering information with minimal manual effort. Data is just not driving enough decisions for them, which is a major problem. This is an issue in logistics, human resources, and cyber defense at the forward edge. So really, there's no agency or service branch that doesn't need help ingesting, managing, and analyzing its data. So leaders know that their data can give them a military advantage, but they need help in getting to the how. And as systems continue to migrate to cloud environments, we're still seeing some challenges associated with data integration. There are still plenty of legacy systems out there that have not yet migrated to the cloud for one reason or another. So it's tricky to integrate data from these legacy systems, storing data in a traditional data center environment with ones that are already being hosted in the cloud. So the service branches and the DoD Fourth Estate agencies need innovative middleware and data integration solutions to help bridge those gaps between various systems. With integrated data, the services, agencies, and commands will be able to analyze and share data much more effectively. And as it stands right now, data management and analysis remains far too manual of a process. Intelligence and operations components across the DoD are just not going to be able to keep up with the data influx through raw manpower alone. Across the board, components are dealing with analyst shortages. And DoD leaders need management solutions that have a good degree of automation into them to free up the analysts so that they can focus on actually analyzing the information rather than sifting through huge amounts of data.
Instinctive technology is really all about simplified, automated, intuitive solutions, and that's exactly what the DoD needs right now, whether we're talking about software-defined networking or intrusion prevention detection. Now, recently, Major General Pierre Gallagher, the Director of Operations, Networks, and Architecture at the Army's G6, recently emphasized a need to push back complexity from the forward edge back to the headquarters level. Now, that isn't to say that headquarters needs any overly cumbersome solutions either, but there's clearly an emphasis on user-friendly solutions all across the enterprise, as not every end user is going to be an IT specialist. Now, speaking of instinctive technology, there's a couple of examples we like to point out of solutions we've seen requested across the department. DoD IT decision makers are constantly asking for self-healing network capabilities. Even with good network awareness, intrusion prevention, when disruption does occur, cybersecurity and networking DoD customers don't want to wait for solutions that require a human in the loop. They need solutions that automatically correct and heal networks without a human in the equation. It's simply too time-consuming to rely on a human response to automated cyber attacks. Simple, automated healing capability would make an enormous difference in maintaining DoD network uptime and security. And it's really not just networking that needs automation. Cyber defense in general is far too manual, far too dependent on human in the loop. It's cheap and cost-effective for our adversaries to automate cyber attacks while cyber defense is expensive, time-consuming, and manpower-intensive. DoD systems really are not trying to be on the wrong side of the cost curve. They need cyber tools that are more simplified and hands-off, tools that react instinctually to cyber threats. Whether we're talking to Army, Navy, DLA, Air Force, DISA, everyone in DoD is asking for more automated cyber defense solutions.
So it's clear, like Mark said, cyber is becoming more and more critical as a domain for warfighting. Offensively and defensively, it's been a big priority across the department. And that is coalescing with Cyber Command's elevation to full command status. So this is something that has been a long time coming. Cybercom has been scaling up since its inception in 2009 to become the joint central hub of the DoD. So Congress approved Cybercom's elevation in the FY18 NDAA, and on August 18th, President Trump ordered Cybercom's elevation to full command status. So to date, Cybercom has officially been under Stratcom, although they operate pretty independently while maintaining very close ties to the NSA. So Admiral Mike Rogers leads both NSA and Cybercom. So going forward, Cybercom may be split a bit more from NSA, but they will continue to tell us, continue to maintain a special relationship, they tell us. So Cybercom is due to reach full operating capability on October 1st, 2018, and we expect Cybercom's elevation to a full command to coincide around that date. So Cyber Command will continue to ramp up purchasing of cyber tools with a special $75 million a year rapid procurement fund, and that goes through 2021. So the command needs to bolster its offensive and defensive cyber toolkit to support the Cybercom Joint Operations Center at Fort Meade. So vendors with innovative cyber solutions need to be paying close attention to Cybercom, and they recently hosted their first Industry Day on October 27th. So at Cybercom and its service counterparts, R-Cyber, the 24th Air Force, MAR-4 Cyber, and the 10th Fleet, the emphasis is on automating cyber defense, as we just mentioned, not cyber offense. So cyber offense still needs a human in the loop for a variety of reasons. But automated cyber defense will be key to Cybercom, and Cybercom is going to continue to hold major sway over various components of the DoD when it comes to cyber.
So let's move on to a concept that's being discussed in every corner of DoD. Better information sharing and interoperable systems that can give us the edge and element of surprise in a warfighting capacity. Bringing together all the information we have across domains is going to affect the way that the DoD looks at their infrastructure, the data integration, analytics. The concept is really all about syncing their operations. Now, DoD service branches, combatant commands, and agencies work with a wide variety of partners, whether internal to the DoD, the IC, other federal agencies, state, local bodies, or allied partner nations. There are so many different networks, systems, and platforms and classification levels. And these are, frankly, all domains. Various stakeholders within and outside the DoD need to be able to share information, communicate, and operate across every domain. Interoperability isn't a luxury, it's imperative. It's critical to emphasize multi-domain capabilities when speaking to your DoD customers. You need to be cognizant and aware of your customer's partner network. Solutions need to be flexible, working across different networks, systems, and architectures. And your solution will need to be as interoperable with as many of their partners as possible. Now, in addition to the traditional warfighting domains of land, sea, and air, space and cyber are becoming increasingly important to the warfighter. You've seen how Stephanie has indicated how Cybercom was leading the charge with cyber, but space is an area where more attention is being paid. In fact, the budget for space programs is up 20% in the FY18 request. And originally, the space domain was created without concern over our adversaries. And that's just no longer the case, and some of our most valuable assets are controlled from the space domain. Think GPS, weather systems, financial systems. Disruption could spell disaster. So we need to focus on how to defend space and even develop offensive capabilities if needed. And we need to consider space as a warfighting domain and part of that multi-domain operations sequence. Now, ideally, DoD leaders would like domain-on-demand capability. A tool should not just be limited to any one particular domain. Take, for example, if a service branch is operating in one domain that's contested, they want the ability to rely on others and finding on other domains and all the associated data to maintain the edge. This is going to present a challenge as everyone is operating at different paces on different networks and different platforms. Multi-domain operations is really all about getting the right piece of information, regardless of the domain it's originating from, to the right battlespace decision maker in the right time frame. This is going to affect how agencies acquire everything from networking products to data management and analytics for C2 applications, so you want to be sure to keep interoperability at the top of your mind when speaking to DoD customers.
All right, so now let's move on to our DoD deep dive, starting with DISA. So here's a look at its budget request for FY18. Much of DISA's budget is derived from fees they get paid by the rest of the DoD for the circuitry and information superhighways that DISA provides for the rest of the department. So there's about $35 billion worth of deployed infrastructure that DISA provides and sustains. About $5.5 billion of its overall projected $9.4 billion spend is dedicated to IT. So DISA's budget depends largely on the level of demand from the service branches for the capabilities it provides. So while things like cloud provisioning are now decentralized, DISA will continue to provide critical network management functions, enterprise services, and the single security architecture that supports military interoperability and command and control.
On that note, let's talk about what's influencing technology spending across DISA. Now, naturally, the Joint Regional Security Stacks remains the highest profile initiative, and this program, if you're not aware, centralizes the DoD network security to regional security centers. DoD has set aside almost $2 billion for this program over the next 5 years. Now, connected to that concept is the idea of movable networks. Now, like frequency hopping DISA wants to instill mobility into the network to make it a moving target and thus more secure. And they're looking for fresh approaches to security, like analyzing threats within the commercial data center rather than processing and analyzing it back in-house. Now, cloud is another area where DISA has been active, having awarded back in June a $500 million contract to CSRA for MilCloud 2.0. This on-premises commercial cloud will provide infrastructure as a service to the service branches and DoD agencies. There is some hope here that with competitive pricing and the secure environment provided, that MilCloud 2.0 will be attractive to the rest of the department. DISA is also looking to evolve the network boundary, and they've told us that this will include a greater embrace of software-defined networking to include automated provisioning so that DoD customers can get their capabilities automatically. This will make their voice and video pathways much more agile, flexible, and responsive. And they also want to bring more survivability to their SATCOM, so look to see some funding set aside over the next few years to ensuring their satellite communications are more capable as well as secure.
All right, so here's a look at their organization. So just as a reminder, when you get the territory planner, all these will have names in them. So the Development and Business Office, led by Alfred Rivera, needs to be your first stop. So this is where IT gets bought and inducted into DISA. They oversee the Cyber Development Directorate, which oversees cyber analytics, network operations, and DoD's mobility program, all big focus areas for the department. This winter, we'll see a big contract coming out of this office, the Defense Enterprise Office Solutions. So right now, the military uses individual stovepipe systems for each service, like voice and video. So this contract is going to provide an upgraded email system, as well as teleconferencing, portals, and many different collaboration services via the cloud to the rest of the department. So this is a good investment and partnering opportunity for those in the data management, business applications, analytics, and visualization space. Then you've also got the Operations Center, led by David Bennett on the right, and that's where that $35 billion worth of infrastructure I alluded to earlier gets sustained. So while they're not buying IT solutions, they are certainly driving requirements for things like storage, networking, cloud, and even cybersecurity. So we recommend having conversations with both offices. And then a couple of additional highlights. The National Background Investigation System, which DISA will procure, replaces the government's background investigation system. It's scheduled to go live next October, and right now they're still trying to nail down the acquisition strategy and figure out what the system's actually going to look like, so we might see that timeline get slipped a bit to the right. Another highlight is the Joint Service Provider Office, and that became fully operational a few weeks ago. And that's the new organization resulting from the merger between the Army IT Agency and Washington Headquarters Services Enterprise IT Directorate. So now all of the IT that's bought for the Pentagon and other DoD buildings in the area gets funneled through this central office. And a big focus for them in the coming year is going to be migrating all the Pentagon's networks to the Joint Regional Security Stacks.
So let's get to our first IT program of the day. And this is one of DISA's largest funded IT programs. And this bucket of money oversees the DoD core data centers, known as the DECs, or the Defense Enterprise Computing Centers. The big change here is the realignment of DISA's storage and computing operations. Before, each of the 9 or 10 or so DECs had their own chain of command, ways of doing business, and data center tools. Essentially, DISA was paying for 9 or 10 iterations of the same thing. Now you're seeing one computing ecosystem physically dispersed across all of the DECs. Now, depending on what solution you sell, there's probably only one POC to engage now. The names are listed in the territory planner as we promised, and requirements do remain the same. DISA is still buying security tools for the data center. Actually, recently they created a cyber monitoring group dedicated especially to the DECs. That group is led by Larry Klooster. DISA is also looking for more automation, analytics, and monitoring solutions as well. The DECs are looking for ways to reduce the latency in connectivity between the DECs, and as well as make that transmission of information across their network more secure. That's a challenge from right now, so they're definitely going to need some help in that department. So definitely have conversations with them about that. It's a great time for you regardless of whether you're involved with software-defined storage or networking, or partner with someone who is.
All right, moving on to the Air Force. So looking at their budget, there is about a 7% increase overall between the FY17 enacted base budget and the FY18 request. And specific to the IT budget, it's about a 3% increase. So pretty good news overall there. Within the base budget request, the bucket getting the largest bump in funding is with that RDT&E amount, and that is where we should see more investment in cyber. So just as a note here, what I'm showing you is the blue Air Force budget. The Air Force does have a component to its budget that contains space and classified investments. Obviously, we're going to be focused on unclassified, so that's going to extend to our IT budget as well. So within the IT budget, most of the increase is coming from the development, modernization, and enhancement, or CapEx category. So along with cyber, another place where we expect to see more investment is going toward their data strategy, so that airmen can have access to more and better sources of data across different mission areas. Going back to the idea of using IT as a tool to make better decisions. Right now, airmen have to deal with a lot of conflicting sources of data, so it's hard to know what is the authoritative data source. And there's a lot of manual processes that they have to go through before they can perform any actual analysis.
So, speaking of data, the Air Force wants to use data to their strategic advantage. So, they're the first of the service branches to create the position of the Chief Data Officer. That's Major General Kim Kreider, who reports up to the Air Force Secretary. And this shows the level of commitment and investment to their data strategy. And they're looking to finally start linking data sources across their mission areas to determine what the relevant information is, then actually analyze it and use it to drive decisions. They've historically been an organization that realizes the value of the data. The Air Force produces about 22 terabytes a day purely off their weapon systems alone. But the creation of this role serves a real momentum to use and share data across all the mission areas. It's all, again, tying back to the concept of multi-domain operations. The Air Force considers the idea of using data to bolster their capabilities if, say, they're operating in one domain that's contested, they're relying upon a different domain and along with all the associated data from that domain to maintain the edge. The Air Force considers that domain-on-demand capability to be very decisive. The plan is to use data across all these different domains, and that's going to affect the way they look at infrastructure, cyber, and analytics. So vendors of those solutions, you want to take note. The Air Force is also currently working on a new open architecture backbone for intelligence so they can shift to a more data-centric architecture that will allow them to add new capabilities faster so they can maintain that combat readiness. And they've all continued to make progress with cloud, with the continuation of the Collaboration Pathfinder contract with the cloud-hosted enterprise services. They've moved over email, and now they're working at moving over unified communications. On the tactical side, they can definitely look to use cloud computing more, and especially in regards to traditional weapon systems like the Air Operations Center, so they can improve security, and we'll touch on that program momentarily. The final item to note is the possible merger of the 24th and 25th Air Forces. Maybe they'll just call it the 49th Air Force. I'm glad I got a laugh there. ISR airmen have to respond to both electronics and signal-based attacks, and the lines can often get pretty blurry between the two. So this again harkens back to the idea of using data across different mission sets, in this case signals and electronics, to defend against our adversaries and possibly take offensive action. To summarize, for the Air Force, make sure you tweak your messaging to focus on helping them use their data across all the different mission areas. And whether you're dealing with storage, cloud analytics, cyber, whatever it is, protecting their data as they build their strategy around it will remain key.
All right, so starting with their overall organization, the main changes we're going to see are being driven by the need for them to bolster their capabilities in space. So the Air Force just added this new A-11 Space Operations Office, highlighted up there in green, as part of the Air Staff. And Major General David Thompson, who right now is the Deputy Chief of Staff at Air Force Space Command, was just nominated to this post. So this new office was created to show the Air Force's commitment to space programs, so that's one big change to pay attention to overall. So now we're going to get into the highlighted red organizations, which are going to be the main tech orgs across the Air Force that you'll care about. And we'll start with the A6. And this office is very important for setting IT policies for the rest of the Air Force to follow. So not really a purchasing organization, but still very important. They've got a new A6 at the helm, and that's Lieutenant General B.J. Schwedo. Since he used to be commander of the 25th Air Force a while back, you can kind of see how all of these moving pieces are aligning to get the 24th under the 25th. And General Schwedo has said he wants to make sure both organizations get their due consideration so that they're getting the best mix of capabilities between intelligence and cyber. So you can also see by looking at the names of the other offices that cyber is the major focus. This office is also what's driving a lot of the requirements for open architecture, not just for Intel systems, but their command and control and battle management planning systems as well, pointing back to their strategy to flatten infrastructure for better information sharing across domains to help them keep the edge.
So now we're going to dig down into some of the buying organizations, both on the acquisition as well as the program management side, and then end users. The Air Force Lifecycle Management Center, which is one of the 6 centers that reports up to the Air Force Materiel Command, and they're tasked with weapon system sustainment and fielding. And the 3 highlight offices you see here are the biggest buyers of commercial off-the-shelf technology across the Air Force. Now, I'm not saying that the other offices aren't buying. I mean, they are, but 3 highlight offices here are so important because the majority of the Air Force's IT programs are housed under these 3. And the end users of those IT programs are dispersed across the Air Force. This morning, we're going to take a closer look at PEO Battle Management, which is led by Stephen Wirt, and PEO for Business Enterprise Systems, which is led up by Rich Aldrich, PEO C3INN and Hanscom, which manages the Air Force's infrastructure and cybersecurity weapon systems, is led up by Major General Dwyer Dennis. They're all covered in the territory planner, but I'd like to say now, this is a great place for the insertion of any technologies that have to do with cloud. They have this common computing environment, which will help them operate in that cloud space, as well as virtualization and cyber vulnerability testing. Really, any cyber capability will have a play here. Now, this is where all the Air Force's major cloud and cyber investments are managed from an acquisition and program management standpoint. The other big Air Force PEO at Hanscom is their Battle Management Office. And they're responsible for mission planning, surveillance, and intelligence, including DCGS, which is managed by the C2ISR division at Warner Robins by Colonel Ray Weir, as well as AWACS and JSTARS. It's pretty clear that a lot of acquisition dollars are moving through this PEO, and it's an important office because improvements to these battle planning systems are going to tie in very closely with their mission of using technology intelligently to maintain military strength, I should say. So, to take one example here, they're flattening their intelligence infrastructure so that they can share information between commanders and get a better common operating picture. They're looking at infrastructure, cloud, analytics, and of course, cyber to make sure information stays protected. We're going to hone in on the Air and Space Operations Center weapon system, which ties into that multi-domain operations sequence. And it's managed under the Operations C2 division you see there by Colonel Don Hill.
So this is the IT program the Air Force uses to plan and conduct air operations across the entire Air Force in the COCOMs. So you might have seen us present on it in years past. We always like to select programs that address a wide range of technology needs, but also tie in with the Air Force's main priorities. So back in July for this effort, the Air Force terminated Northrop's contract for a network upgrade. So Northrop and Jacobs Engineering Group still hold the sustainment contracts for this effort, but now in terms of modernization, the Air Force is working with DIUX to develop a more agile solution after facing a host of schedule and cost deviations. So now they're going to call this new portion AOC Pathfinder and want to use DevOps software development. So basically, they decided the status quo wasn't working anymore and that they wanted to make some quick fixes. So this new plan involving DevOps will involve a lot more automation for testing and updating software code. So they're still going to have many of the same requirements, though with this new approach, hopefully they'll get results faster. So this is a program with needs for systems engineering and test, data integration, and they've also put out a call for a capability to allow for advanced threat hunting software using AI or machine learning. So they're definitely interested in quickly bringing the AOC up to speed to combat cyber threats. This is one of their most critical battle space awareness programs that's going to allow them to reach across different users in the COCOMs and Air Force to give them the advantage, and cyber is going to be a key component to maintaining that edge. So that's our battle space awareness program. Business systems will still be equally important to helping the Air Force use its data to its strategic advantage. So our next PEO is led by Rich Aldridge, and they manage all of the Air Force's business and enterprise systems, and they're located at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama. Their focus is on logistics and business sustainment, enterprise services, and operations. So this is a good organization for vendors selling BPM, PLM, application and development products, as they manage the Air Force's ERPs to provide accounting, logistics, and personnel management.
So that brings us on to our next program, the Defense Enterprise Accounting and Management System, or DEAMS. And this is what the Air Force uses to replace all their legacy financial systems and get to that auditability function. As they modernize, they've been able to start using cloud more, and recently Shirley Reed, who is the CIO of the Air Force's Financial Management Office, recently said that they're finally been able to move some of their team off of IT and onto actual auditing, which is what they're supposed to be doing. So they're focused on using data as a strategic asset, and finance is just an easy way to start seeing the benefits from using data. They're looking at fielding more interoperable solutions in the long term, but in the near term, their focus is on data protection. They've created a small cyber audit cell that works with stakeholders to harden their systems and identify vulnerabilities. So it's going to be a good program to target for any kind of cyber solution as they figure out their cyber posture for their financial management tools. So think data protection, backup, and network security. That's going to be crucial as they continue to decommission more and more of their legacy financial systems. Now, moving away from the PEOs and onto end user organizations, everyone's going to be looking at the Air Force Space Command as we wait for details on the potential move for the 24th. Word on the street is that it likely wouldn't happen until about next September, so they're still defining what an end state would look like. Major General Chris Wegeman leads the 24th currently, and he is reporting a lot of the same concerns that the other DoD leaders are doing. There's concern over our enemy's power projection in cyber. It's often the easiest place to target, since not a lot of effort or resources can have devastating effects. Moving the 24th under the 25th will also mean that the Air Force Space Command is dedicated now entirely to space programs. So with the increased focus of space, we're going to take a look at one of the programs that falls under the Space and Missile Systems Center of Responsibility, which is led up by Lieutenant General John Thompson since May.
So in looking at one of the Air Force's IT programs for space, you can kind of compare this to the Air Operations Center. That's kind of the same idea. So this is how satellite operators get a picture of space and what's going on there. So remember, space is an area leaders are worried about becoming more contested. They also worry about it becoming more congested with more and more satellites. So it's become necessary for us to get information about objects in space. And this system involves a lot of data integration between government and commercial data sources, so it's a very data-heavy program, especially as we get better at tracking smaller and smaller objects in space. When Space Fence launches in 2019, it's going to bring even more data into the system. So the Air Force wants the ability to manage space battles in real time, which is what this Increment 3 RFP is going to try to do moving forward. And that's going to involve flattening infrastructure to bring intelligence data together for a better operating picture. And finally, cyber is going to be a big part of modernizing space systems to ensure that we've still got the edge there. So right now, the Air Force is looking at adding encryption data to satellites in case of an attack.
That's what I get for drinking some water.
All right, this is going to be our last Air Force organization for today. I just wanted to quickly highlight Air Combat Center, our command. They oversee the tactical day-to-day operations of the Air Force, and they spend almost $700 million on IT each year. So like the rest of the Air Force, they're increasingly focused on using their data for better decision-making. Air Warfare Center is going to be critical to the integration, development, and test for weapon systems, so very critical for multi-domain operations. And then also you're going to want to concentrate on the 25th for cyber security decision-making as the transition of the 24th rolls out.
So I try to come up with a good joke for transitioning to the Army, but I don't really have one, so we're just going to jump right in. We'll start with the budget, since that naturally is going to drive their priorities. And in terms of the operating budget, the FY18 request has about a 5% increase from the FY17 enacted levels. The Army is naturally pretty concerned about maintaining military dominance and keeping ahead of our adversaries. They do have a lot of personnel, so a big chunk of the pie is going to go towards the MilPERS, but the largest piece of the pie is the O&M, which sees the biggest jump in request funding. The Army wants to add about $3 billion to this account to restore readiness, and it's an opportunity to modernize IT at the base installation level. They're looking to add more up-to-date technology, particularly in terms of security and IT services. The last piece of the pie I'll mention right now is their RDT&E, or the modernization funds. They're naturally trying to add more cutting-edge technology to the weapon systems to outmatch adversaries. Now, the IT budget is relatively flat. It does have almost about a 1% increase this year. They did, however, increase the DME, or the CapEx portion of that budget. So they're looking to show some dedication here to adding newer technology. So whether you're selling cyber, business, analytics solutions, whatever it is, going to want to message your product to show that your solution is going to add more new edge capability to help them modernize and maintain that optimal readiness.
So in terms of some specific IT priorities, the Army actually appears to be making some strides to protect its networks fast. So General Crawford, their CIO, has described this as a 16-year problem that now needs a 1-year solution. So this summer, the Army took a hard look at all of their networks, and they want to focus on how to simplify them. So right now they have about 20 different baselines for all the software they use on their networks because their hardware is so out of date. So they want to upgrade all their networks to a single and consistent baseline within the next 2 years. And the same thinking is going to extend to cybersecurity. They'll be looking for resiliency to be able to operate in any environment with any allied partner. You can expect these upgrades to be taking place through 2019 and expect requirements around simplified infrastructure and configuration management solutions and enabling cyber resiliency as part of their network path forward. For tactical networks, this common baseline will mean changes to the common operating environment. So now fire, intel, maneuvers are all going to share the same common software infrastructure, security, etc. So the first version of this converged mission command will be going under operational testing in 2018, and this is going to enable better communication between systems. So when it comes to the Army's network, think interoperable. And all the simplification should be good news for technology companies. The Army definitely wants to leverage commercial solutions where they can and adapt and buy them rather than going through years and acquisition cycles. Then finally, the Army, like Mark said on the previous slide, will still be wanting to invest in leap-ahead technologies. So science and tech for the development of these capabilities remains a big priority that points back to their desire to overmatch an adversary. So this is where there may be a play for big data and analytics vendors to help the Army shape its machine learning and AI strategy. So Project Maven is one example where the Army is looking to leverage AI and machine learning to help analysts overcome the volume of video data that they have to go through. And the Army Research Lab is leading that effort and then coordinating with other elements of the DoD that looks at similar problems.
So we've highlighted the main organizations we're going to take a deeper dive into today. Now, there are no new offices to highlight yet, but at AUSA last month, General Milley, the Army's Chief of Staff, announced plans for a new organization that's dedicated to looking at modernization and embracing that. Definitely going to want to pay close attention as plans are beginning to take shape because they'll affect the way equipment and products are purchased across the Army. It's going to set them up for multi-domain operations by setting up cross-functional teams. Right now, they've got a task force researching what a modernization command should look like, and the goal is to get it set up by next summer. And details are coming out every day about this, so pay close attention. Now, we're going to start with the Army's G6 office. We do have a new Army CIO with Lieutenant General Bruce Crawford, and he came over from CCOM back in August. Gary Wong is still the Deputy CIO, And their big focus is on making sure their networks are less fragmented and stovepiped, so looking at how to converge them in order to increase its security and interoperability. General Crawford has remarked that the networks they have now are not the ones they need for the future because they're not set up for interoperability and they lack the inherent security they need. They want to reimagine the network as a weapon system, and they definitely want to be simpler for those in the field to operate and set up. Again, more instinctive. He's also had to go before lawmakers recently to propose that halt to Increment 2 of WIN-T to repurpose those funds to overhauling the current network's cyber protections. We're going to touch on that in a moment, but first we're going to take a look at Netcom. Since they're responsible for actually implementing network requirements and changes as they trickle down from the G6. They're the main organization responsible for the Army's portion of their DoD, and they report up directly to our cyber. They're headquartered up at Fort Huachuca, and their commanding general is Major General John Baker. I'd recommend focusing mainly on the 7th Signal Command, since they control the NECs, the Network Enterprise Centers, and they're largely responsible for handling implementation of installation IT services and cybersecurity that I referred to back on the budget slide. And the 7th Signal Command is led up by Brigadier General Welton Chase.
All right, so ASALT is where all of the Army's program management and acquisition PEOs sit. So today we're going to talk about the enterprise and tactical PEOs, PEO EIS, and PEO C3T respectively. Then there's also the Rapid Capabilities Office, or RCO, that was stood up roughly a year ago, and they're focused on getting capabilities fielded faster to help with that modernization concern. In terms of cyber, the main play for product will be with helping them evaluate technologies to harden weapon systems. So they'd be interested in network protection, threat and vulnerability testing, risk analysis, cyber analytics, so pretty much the gamut of cyber products, as that's a big problem to tackle, and Doug Wiltsey is still their director. All right, getting into PEO C3T, there's definitely a lot to talk about when it comes to WIN-T. So basically, after the Army's review of its networks this summer, they decided the current network wasn't getting the job done. So then they proposed to Congress that they wanted to halt funding that would go toward Increment 2 of WIN-T, and that would have provided networking on the move. And then they wanted to reroute that money to make network fixes, and that's all about $500 million. So this diversion of funds is a direct result over concern over adversaries' networks catching up to us. So the tactical network is absolutely a weapons system. If it isn't strong and resilient enough, it is definitely putting lives at risk. So now the office, which was formerly known as PM WIN-T, now changed its names to PM Tactical Network to reflect its entire portfolio, which also includes satellite communications, but also maybe because WIN-T has become a bit of a four-letter word for the Army right now. So now all of this may not be a bad thing, just like the cancellation of that air and space operations contract. The WIN-T halt may actually be a sign of progress, leaders knowing that tackling today's threats with yesterday's tactics is counterproductive. So earlier this week, Congress expressed skepticism about this plan, saying that the Army didn't provide them with enough detail of the network fixes. So FY18 funding is a bit up in the air at this point. So there's a lot of moving pieces. You're going to want to stay tuned. Colonel Greg Coyle still leads this office. So once they do get a sense of what lies ahead, we definitely see them as having a need for new capabilities to protect and strengthen the network. In terms of a couple other offices, Network Enablers, led by Stanley Nemec, handles product acquisition for the tactical network. And then finally, there's Mission Command, led by Colonel Troy Crosby, who work on battlefield situation awareness programs like Tactical Mission Command.
Now, this program is crucial for how the Army consolidates their software systems into a common baseline configuration for the common operating environment, all with the goal of reducing network complexity and allowing for easier and faster software upgrades, increasing the interoperability between units, again, all about interoperability. The consolidation is going to happen between now and 2019, where the Army will be bringing together the tactical components of the COE, fires, maneuver, intel. You're going to have a lot of needs based around configuration management solutions, networking, and data integration tools. Now, I'm sure everyone's paying close attention to the little drop of funding for FY18. This should be cyclical, and I'd expect funds to increase in 2019 as their plan to collapse software baselines finally matures. This program is crucial for the Army's ability to field interoperable solutions so they can operate in any domain, get a picture of what's going on in the field, and maintain that edge. Now we're going to switch gears here to enterprise systems, and there's been some office changes here too. You could see some increased focus on interoperability with the creation of 2 new offices. APEO ERP integration, which focuses on ERP migration to the DISA-DEX, and network integration, which is focused on making the networks operate seamlessly. Now, the overall PEO here is Brigadier General Patrick Burden, and they're looking at big IT initiatives for the Army's enterprise. So think data center optimization, cloud implementation, business logistics, and financial integration via their ERPs, and operation of their SATCOMs and enterprise networks and the associated defense. Now, some key offices here. Manish Patel is still the CIO, so that's naturally a good insertion point. The I3MP program, which falls under the network umbrella, which modernizes the CONUS networks, is led up by Brendan Burke. And enterprise services is where all the offices for cloud implementation, the data center initiatives, unified capabilities, and IT service contracts are headed up, and that's led by Thomas Neff. Information and context for the ERPs are going to be in the territory planner, but we'll highlight one program that really showcases the Army's multi-domain operations concept.
And that's Global Command Support System, which is the Army's ERP for logistics and finance. And it's going to help the Army modernize its logistical operations. So this is taking thousands of databases and integrating them into a single ERP. By moving to a single system, they're going to have a much better picture of what's going on for supply, maintenance, property, ammunition, and finance. They're going to be able to see where they're performing well or falling short in terms of delivering logistics capabilities, like making sure equipment is getting where it needs to be in a timely fashion. So this is a system that should improve readiness across the Army, remember, one of their near-term priorities, and it will provide a decisive advantage in their logistical processes and supply chain management, letting them see readiness in real time. So just like the other program, you don't have to be worried about the drop in funding. That's because right now Increment 1 is winding down with the replacement of their maintenance and property book systems, and that's going to wrap up by the end of this year. So future requirements for GCSSA will look at integrating their aviation logistics data, as well as improving business intelligence and decision-making capabilities. So those are the Increment 2 goals, and that should be better funded going forward. So this is a good example of how one of their business and operations systems are enabling tactical operations. Accurate, timely information is what's going to be important for multi-domain operations, and integrating information into one operational picture is where they're hoping to be.
I was born and raised in Virginia Beach, and so I'm not biased at all when I say it's time for my favorite service branch, the Navy, which requested about $172 billion, which is an increase of about $13 billion over the FY17 enacted budget. And within that budget, the Marine Corps personally saw a bump of $3 billion to $26 billion. What's striking here is the amount of money that goes towards things not called procurement, and it drives home what we hear repeatedly. Technology solutions that not only add capability but can replace something already in the toolkit are a lot easier to justify. IT spending has enjoyed some incremental increases year over year, and we do expect that trend to continue. We expect the Navy and Marine Corps to have about $8 billion set aside for IT, with more tucked away in classified IT spend and in platform programs. I expect Canes and the upcoming NGEN recompete to eat up the bulk of the capital expenditures within the IT budget, but as we mentioned earlier, program managers are pretty clever about finding money for CapEx expenditures within maintenance accounts. Now, the spending increases I just mentioned here they're not quite enough to maintain the optimal readiness, as any Navy leader will tell you. The Navy has an important role all across the world, considering how many spots require a naval presence. And given what they're being asked to do to meet the gap in funding, they're looking to technology and, by extension, the IT industry to help meet the gap. We see that in ongoing network modernization efforts like Canes and NGEN, but also in programs like CAC2S, as well as the electronic procurement system. The Navy has issued a mandate to move everything to the commercial cloud, and even that is part of their drive to improve readiness through technology by optimizing what they do with their data and getting better at AI and analytics. And of course, security is paramount. Now, despite what Captain Phillips would have you believe, the concern is not about pirates in the high seas, it's really about cyber breaches. I figured that joke would bomb pretty bad. This is especially pertinent given the hyper-reliance ships and aircraft have to shore-based sites. Now, commanders are looking to industry to boost and bolster their platforms on the sea, undersea, and in the air. The Navy now views their network, their IT, as their warfighting platform. They need help in uncovering what that means as far as requirements and capabilities, but also in reducing their attack surface and driving vulnerabilities out of their systems.
All right, so here's a 30,000-foot look at the Navy. Since last year's budget briefing, there have been a lot of leadership changes to include a new acting CIO, Kelly Fletcher. So what hasn't changed are the highlighted IT insertion points. So many of your cybersecurity requirements, for instance, are still going to come out of the N2, N6, led by Vice Admiral Jan Tai. The systems commands and PEOs in the lower right build the Navy's weapons and C4 programs, and that's where we see a lot of the IT spend happening, primarily around cybersecurity, infrastructure, network, and data management. So let's get into the commands you'll care the most about, starting with NAVSEA. And this is the largest systems command in the Navy with over $30 billion to spend in FY18. Your main centers of gravity are the naval surface and undersea commands. So autonomy and interoperability are huge urgencies here. Our fleet's much smaller than what it was during the Cold War, yet the threats out there are much more dispersed. So the Navy's betting on technologies that require less manpower to operate while still maintaining the military advantage. Also, because the way the Navy fights is with a hybrid force, think manned and unmanned systems across domains. The solutions they'll buy are ones that need to work across independent and integrated security architectures. Data and network management solutions, analytics and visualization tools, and everyone's favorite, cybersecurity, fall right into their wheelhouse.
Now, next up is NAVAIR, which, of course, sees development of the Naval Air Forces. And our interactions with NAVAIR, the themes that come up constantly are situational awareness and analytics. Now, most of you have vehicles that are much more modern than mine that have sensors in your tires that tell you when it's time to put more air in your tire. I mean, I just look at my tires, but NAVAIR wants to take that concept to the next level and implement through IoT ways of pulling data from disparate data systems into a single source to allow for maintenance, supply, and even operations based on need rather than a set schedule. Again, improved readiness is the focus here. And NAVAIR needs visualization and battle space management support tools as well to support their airborne operations spanning both unmanned and manned systems with multiple assets. Now, before we shift over to the IT programs, let's finish up our organizational tour de force with a look at Navy's two big acquisitional commands. Now, led by Rear Admiral Carl Chebby, POC4I's mission is all about providing technologies that support the Navy's surveillance, reconnaissance, and communications needs. And they spend about $2 billion a year. Programs like CANES do fall under POC4I. That's the Navy's massive afloat network overhaul they're undergoing. These offices you see here, including those that we did not highlight, have massive requirements for bandwidth, logistics solutions, data links, and analytics. Now, the key takeaway here is that POC4I oversees systems and networks where you can actually see the concepts of automation being applied in real-time situations.
All right, so our last Navy organization is POEIS, led by Ruth Youngs-Liu. So this is where they buy business operations and other information systems that provide back-end support to the warfighter. So PMW 205 manages the Navy's shore-based networks. When you think of 220 and 240, think of enterprise business systems and pay and personnel. 230 and 440 buy maintenance and logistics data collection tools for the Marine Corps and NAVSEA, respectively. And then our unnumbered office, the Data Center Optimization Office, just be aware that cloud brokerage responsibilities are going to be distributed to the Syscoms and SPAWAR as the Navy moves to migrate all of its data, even top secret level information, to the commercial cloud by 2022. So expect 2 cloud RFIs by the end of the year, and these contracts will be aimed at opening the aperture beyond just AWS, which is the Navy's current preferred CSP. So in terms of programs, there are very few bigger than the engine recompete. The largest intranet in the world is undergoing an overhaul. So many of you who cover the Navy are aware that the recompete contract is going to be split into 2, one focusing on hardware, and the other one has a much broader scope, namely network services, data center facilities, C2 support, and cybersecurity. So this is yet another large network improvement project, taking a new approach to acquisition as the Navy increased its collaboration with industry to get a better feedback loop going. So that's hopefully going to save them some time and money down the line. You can expect an extension on the current $3.5 billion contract, which expires next June, since the awards for the recompete are not expected until next November and December. So with this recompete, the Navy's looking for streamlined, leaner and meaner infrastructure, and the cloud migration effort that we've been talking about is part of that vision. Program managers are also looking to bake in more command and control into their network, but where they'll really need help is figuring out how to wage battlefield management securely when data sets live in the cloud. So that's going to be something new for them. They're also exploring how to use more advanced data analytics to improve cybersecurity. So security before for them meant plugging in known gaps and seams. What they want to try and do now is see how they can leverage AI to get ahead of threats.
So the next naval program, and this is the electronic procurement system, which is all about updating one of their legacy business systems. Managed out of PMW 220, the EPS is a modernization effort that's overhauling the legacy contract writing system for the department. The contract writing system was a procurement system that writes and manages most of the Navy's procurement cycle, and it's used by over 100,000 users. The EPS is going to overhaul that and consolidate it into one solution. The $263 million 10-year contract will come with hefty data collection and reporting requirements. It'll also need to be adaptable, and so it can accommodate plugins and extensions, as well as, most importantly, comply with the evolution of the NMCI with the NGen recompete contract. And we'll conclude the Department of Navy section with a look at the U.S. Marine Corps. And while the U.S. Marine Corps is technically part of the Navy, they are their own animal. And that's why it's important to understand the mission of your customer. And vendors selling solutions to the Marine Corps need to first understand how they fight. While other services, they have these long logistical supply chains when they go to war, Marines, they take everything with them. Consequently, they constantly stress to us the importance of mobile, light, and energy-efficient technologies that can be packed up and deployed on a whim. We've talked about how the other services are embracing autonomy, and that's especially true with the Marine Corps. Come to them with solutions that can thrive in diverse and disconnected environments. They've told us if they can't fix it 5,000 miles from here, they frankly don't want it. Think tactical clouds, automated logistics, and IoT as key technologies for them. Now, whether you sell business solutions, visualization, storage, security, whatever it is, it needs to be highly tailored to their unique needs, and you want to ensure that whatever works around the corner here at Quantico or in Camp Lejeune stateside works in a distant battlefield as well.
All right, so here's a look at the main acquisition commands in the Marine Corps. The most important insertion point is the Marine Corps Systems Command, or MARCOR Syscom, led by Brigadier General Joseph Schrader. And this is the acquisition branch of the Marine Corps for IT systems and programs. They purchase IT for the battle management, intelligence, and logistics systems that the Marine Corps takes with them to the fight. So you want to talk to the Information Systems and Infrastructure Division led by Harry Oldland, since many of the IT infrastructure and network purchases go through his office. And then closely affiliated with MARCOR Syscom is the Marine Corps PEO for Land Systems at the top left there. So led by William Taylor, the PEO manages modernization projects and sustainment for many of the Marine Corps family of vehicles. The opportunities for you here center on visualization solutions, data sensors, and application development. So Mark talked a lot about networking on the move technologies. Well, there so happens to be a program of record for the Marine Corps called Networking on the Move. So this program is all about information sharing and multi-domain operations from the Marine Corps. Run out of the Marine Corps Systems Command, Network on the Move is all about providing beyond line of sight command and control capabilities for battlefield commanders. So remember, 21st century combat operations are highly synchronized, involving multiple domains like ground, air, amphibious, sea, and satellite communications. So this program of record ensures that commanders have one common operational picture of the battlefield and can orchestrate all of the assets at his or her disposal. So the software and hardware this program office buys must support classified and unclassified environments and be able to fit on both ground and airborne platforms.
All right, we're coming down the final stretch here this morning with the military health system. And here's a look at their budget request. Now, most of the funding for health IT flows through the Defense Health Agency, the Defense Health Agency's budget is coming down from the Defense Health Program budget account. And outside of requirements for the new EHR, the MHS Genesis, DHA will now use GSA and GSA alone for their procurement needs. Now, they can grant waivers with enough justification, but the policy now is for DHA to look pretty much exclusively at GSA vehicles like Alliant, STARS 2, VETS, Schedule 70. Of course, the special item of note is the new special item number for Health IT under GSA Schedule 70. Now, overall, DHA is expected to purchase over $1 billion worth of products over these vehicles in the next couple of years. Let's talk about what's driving technology procurement across DHA. And now a big priority for Director Vice Admiral Raquel Bano is enticing service members and their dependents to use military treatment facilities more. It's estimated that 60% of the care for service members, of veterans and their families, comes from private sector providers. The Admiral's strategy will absolutely require support from industry as they seek to track healthcare trends, personnel movements, monitor workloads, and improve internal business processes so they can recapture care from the private sector. Another top driver was brought about by last year's NDAA, which called for all military hospitals and clinics to fall under DHA's purview by October 2018. It's a huge development. It's actually going to create a lot of opportunities for cybersecurity, data management, and business operation vendors, because one of the huge challenges that DHA is trying to address is the lack of interoperability between the military treatment facilities. Again, it's really all about interoperability here. DHA wants to ensure that the hundreds of programs and devices that the military hospitals use all speak the same common tongue and are as compatible as possible with the forthcoming new electronic health record. And last but not least is the deployment of that new EHR, as well as its counterpart that is used in the field by medics. DHA has told us that the big priority here is with analytics. They're trying to use analytics wherever they can to support mission planning, as well as shaping training and monitor how their equipment is being used. Making this challenge tricky is when information needs to be shared outside of the DoD umbrella, where everything from brand names to record-keeping standards might be wildly different.
Great, so this is a top-level view of military health systems. Most IT-related roles and responsibilities are being consolidated into DHA, but for now, the other components remain important for those hunting in this space. On the right, you have the Program Executive Office for Defense Healthcare Management Systems, or PEO-DIMS for short. Led by Stacey Cummings, this acquisition office oversees programs focused on modernizing both the core and tactical electronic health record systems, as well as improving interoperability with the VA and private sector. And finally, on the left are the medical commands belonging to each of the military branches. So to have any kind of success selling to these commands, so no matter where the funding originates, you need to understand each of their unique clinical environments, because how some health IT solutions might work with the Army, they're not going to fly with the Navy, and so forth. So it's also important to note for cybersecurity issues, a good insertion point is actually SPAWAR, which is part of the Navy, and that's because their Network Security Operations Center oversees defense of DHA's network, and Cal Stevens and Jason Durand are good POCs there.
Now, the major program run at PODIMS we're going to talk about today is JOMIS, and I mentioned that battlefield-based medical information system before. This is what I was referring to. It oversees healthcare delivery, logistics, patient movement, all the functions you would see with the MHS Genesis, but in a tactical environment. DHA wants to ensure that from the first responder to the rescue helicopter to the theater hospital and finally onto a major hospital, all the information is being collected, pre-populated, and tracked appropriately, as well as made accessible. There is an existing legacy program serving this purpose, but multiple systems govern how medical information is tracked and documented. JOMIS aims to consolidate those systems and upgrade them into one solution. As far as our FY18 priorities go, the focus right now is on making sure those legacy systems play nice with the new MHS Genesis. That's because the new EHR Genesis is coming online before those legacy systems are going to be sunsetted by JOMIS. We're still quite a ways off from a JOMIS award, and the RFP probably wouldn't come until the next fiscal year. That gives us plenty of time to talk to key decision makers like Claire Evans, Charles Updegrove, and Colonel Ryan Bailey as they're brainstorming requirements and having conversations with industry to see what's possible.
All right, and so that was our last program slide. So we finally arrived at the end. So just a few more points that we want to drive home before we finish. So this has been a year where we've seen a lot of changes, so it's even more important to stay on top of budgets and reorganizations so that you can best position yourself for success. In the coming year, I'd expect a lot of emphasis on modernization and new and emerging capabilities for the DoD, with a lot of that focus being on data and connecting systems to share information across domains. DoD leaders have said we've done more damage to ourselves with budget shortfalls and sequestration than any adversary ever could. So now that we should hopefully be better funded going forward, they're really going to be looking to correct course and develop capabilities that can defeat any adversary in any domain, and technology will be the key to demonstrating military superiority. They're going to be looking to industry for innovative solutions, so then it's our job to understand their mission and priorities, help your customer understand how your solution is going to help them gain and keep the edge, and understand that this doesn't always mean a tactical solution. An ERP, network, or cyber monitoring tool can enable superiority over an adversary, enable data-driven decisions, or even just help them save money and divert resources. So whatever type of solution you sell, frame it as a capability that will help the DoD push beyond just readiness and get to the place where we now have the advantage over an adversary through technology. So that is going to do it for us. Thank you so much. Please connect with us on LinkedIn. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day.